It was very different than I expected. Now I have a role where I have questions where no one around me knows the answer. Another thing that surprised me was the much longer feedback loops. I'm Leonard, engineering manager here at Klarna in Stockholm. I relocated about 3 years ago from Germany to Sweden to work for Klarna as a senior software engineer. I first worked in a team working on the Klarna app as a senior software engineer and then transitioned into the engineering manager role. After that, I built 2 new teams in Madrid, and now I'm working with a team in Toronto.
What does a typical day in your work look like?
A typical day in my work looks very different usually. But since my team currently is in Canada, I catch up in the morning on the work my team has done before, maybe some Slack messages or emails. I also in the morning always check our dashboards that our systems didn't have errors in the night or anything like that. I usually start my day with a block of focus time. I really take 2 to 3 hours where I really don't get distracted. I turn Slack off and don't respond to emails in this time. I do that to really focus on a bit of product work or on architectural concepts we are working on during the time. After that focus time, I usually start to catch up on communication, see if we have any requests from other teams and a bit of the Slack messages and emails. And then it's time for lunch. When I'm at home, I usually cook lunch with my girlfriend together, or when I'm in the office, I go out with my colleagues and grab some lunch somewhere around the office. After lunch, I usually start my day with catching up with my team. We do a stand-up, talk about what we want to work on this day, and I also start my one-on-ones with my reports or meetings with other stakeholders I have, also with our product manager to sync on what we want to work on during the next days. After that, I continue my work on, for example, code reviews or architectural documents, or also I give feedback on designs for future features. While not part of my everyday work, I also work a lot on engineering competence-related things, which is, for example, interviewing candidates, improving processes in our engineering culture, or have syncs with all the other engineering managers in my domain. After that, my day is done. And if I'm in the office, I drive home. And if I'm already working from home, I just close my work laptop and open my private laptop.
What are your responsibilities?
As an engineering manager in Klarna, my main responsibility is really working with the team as a team member. So I sit with the engineers every day with our product manager or designers or analysts, and we work on the product together. I usually help the engineers to review code, to discuss architectural topics, or come up with solutions for certain problems. Another part of my responsibilities is the personal and professional growth of my team members. After hiring them, I continue onboarding them, help them to get started within the team, and I have regular check-ins. We do one-on-ones where we talk about blockers or maybe career opportunities for them individually. And the last part of my responsibility is that in Klarna, we work very closely with other engineering managers throughout the engineering competence, and we together try to make the whole engineering culture in Klarna better. We contribute to things like the hiring processes or the engineering culture throughout Klarna.
What do you like most about your job?
I like most that we work in interdisciplinary teams. So in every team, there's usually a few engineers, a product manager, a designer, an analyst, and we all work together to make the product better. So the work is very diverse, and it's not only looking at code, but also looking at designs, talking about the product, and that is a lot of fun to me. Another thing is also that I really like the autonomy we have in the team, so we can really, for our team, decide what is best for us, what works best for us, and what we should work on in the future. And another thing I really enjoy is supporting people and seeing them grow over time.
What would you like to change about your job?
I think it's a very cliche thing to say, but I have too many meetings as a manager, so I would love to reduce the amount of meetings I'm in and increase the amount of focused work I can do. And also, with changing from software engineer to engineer manager, you give up a lot of the time where you can just work on code, and I would like to code more because most of my time coding happens now in my private time on my own projects and not at work anymore.
How do you prepare yourself to become an engineering manager?
I think the most important thing is to become technically experienced and competent. So really focus on one technology you want to become good at. Then I would say start by leading people. It doesn't have to be in the engineer manager role, but it can be, for example, interns or junior engineers, and start by leading them. Another really important part is the communication part. A big part of my job is communicating with stakeholders, with other teams, with my team members. So I would say try to get really good at communication. Lastly, I would say just try out the role. Here at Klarna, we have a program where we can try out the role for 6 months. And if we don't like it, we can go back into the engineering role if we want to.
How was the transition from senior engineer to engineering manager?
I got experience as a software engineer and joined Klarna as a senior software engineer. And in my team back then, there was the opportunity to step up as an engineering manager. So I first took on the role as associate engineering manager and then got promoted to engineering manager. But one super important thing is to have great people around you. And in Klarna, I was lucky that I had really great mentors which helped me to get started, answered a lot of the questions I had, and really helped me to be successful in my job.
How do you manage your old team members?
That can be a super difficult situation to be in because all of a sudden you become the manager of your old colleagues and talk about their salaries, about their maybe promotions and the career growth. And I would suggest to be very open about this promotion, to really communicate it clearly to your team. And as the second step, I would really be very clear about the expectations you have towards them and they have towards you. And as in every other role, you should regularly ask for feedback and get their opinion whether you do well, whether you satisfy their expectations, or what you could maybe improve over time.
What did you expect from the role, and how was it really?
To be honest, it was very different than I expected. I thought it was just my engineering role with a bit of management on top, but it was a completely different job. The focus changed completely from the individual solution you're working on as a senior software engineer to the people around you. So you try to be productive as a team. Another thing that surprised me was the much longer feedback loops. So as a software engineer, you usually work on code and you immediately see if the tests are passing or failing, or you deploy it to production and you immediately see customers using it. But as a manager, you a lot of times take decisions where you don't immediately get feedback. One example could be if you interview a candidate for a role and they take the role and join the company, you only after months, maybe after 6 months, know if that was a good decision or not. Another great advice I got when I became an engineering manager was that now I have a role where I have questions where no one around me knows the answer. Usually as a software engineer, you can go in Stack Overflow and most probably you will find an answer to your problem. But as an engineering manager, your situations and the problems you have, they are so complex that not even your managers can really answer your question 100% perfectly. So a lot of the role of an engineering manager is to find the solutions for the problems you have yourself. Also, in the job as an engineering manager, a lot more time is spent on syncing with stakeholders, with other teams, and on all of those communication aspects of your job. And that was much less when I was a senior engineer, and when I became an engineering manager, that was one of the main parts of my job.
What makes a good engineering manager, in your opinion?
I thought a lot about this question, and I reflected a lot on it when I became a manager. And I think it comes down to 3 things. You need to be competent, you need to be a good leader, and you need to be a good communicator. The competence is really important so that you really know the technology you're working with. This is important to get the trust of the team members and to actually be useful in the conversations and ask the right questions. The leadership part is very important because you should not only manage the team from the outside and supervise their work or micromanage them, but you should actually be a team member working with the team on technical solutions. And the last thing, the communication is so important because a lot of your job is communicating with other people. It is communicating with stakeholders, with teams around your team or within your team. So it is really important to become a good communicator.
Do I need a tech background to become an engineering manager?
In my opinion, yes. I think it is very important to be a good engineer before you become an engineering manager. In Klarna, we even have that as a requirement. So every engineering manager you will meet in Klarna was an engineer before. I've worked in both environments, in companies where there were normal managers without a tech background, and now in Klarna where we have engineering managers who actually have a tech background. And I noticed that it is really much more productive if the people who are talking to you have actually a technical background and understand the complexity and understand the technical solutions which you are working on. Another aspect is that an engineering manager should also be able to jump in if there's a complex technical bug or if the team gets called during an incident.
What are the career opportunities for an engineering manager?
I think as an engineering manager, it is very natural to grow as a lead, to take on larger initiatives, or to work on larger scopes within your company. Usually, as you get more experienced as a leader, your scope and your area of influence changes. So you get involved in larger and larger initiatives, or you also can join the senior leadership working on the whole engineering competence, or on the whole company's engineering culture. One advantage of your engineer manager role is that you get involved in many more topics around the engineering job. So rather than only focusing on a specific problem as a software engineer, you now focus on a much larger scope and much more holistic view of the company. I hope this insight into my job as an engineering manager was helpful, and if there are any more questions, reach out to me and I'm happy to answer them later.